Lord! What happened, Lord? Vasporio was very worried when he saw Lord Caesar, who was being carried by 4 wasp guards. He was missing his left wing, and he seemed to be really disturbed from something. It's all right. I can walk. Thank you, Caesar said. His voice was quiet, weak. The 4 guards listened. They put their lord down, and Caesar stood up. He noticed that everybody in the room, that being Harlow, Vasporio, and the 4 guards that carried him, were confused and expected an explanation of what was going on. So he took a few breaths before telling them what happened. A bug described as an old cripple was noticed on top of the holy tree by one of the guards circling around Hornest. That old cripple was none other than the warrior you all know as Den the Mighty, one of the great knights. The 6 wasps gasped in shock. But aren't you the only knight left? One of the guards asked. Caesar was silent at first. He was thinking about what to say next. I am the last knight standing, from this moment onwards. Before this, Dan was the only other surviving knight. He was hiding somewhere for a very long time. Now he has decided to climb on top of the tree, threatening to cut the branch that's carrying our kingdom off. My guess is that the many seasons of being separated from the rest of the world made him change. I mean, what else could explain the sudden urge to destroy an entire kingdom? The sudden attempt to kill off hundreds? Caesar lied without hesitation. So I stopped him. I killed the mighty Dan. Unfortunately, it came with a cost. As you can see, I lost my left wing, and thus I will not be able to lead the army when Ozara strikes. Caesar paused to see the reaction of his listeners, who were stunned by the whole thing. They knew that Caesar was hiding something, hiding the real truth behind everything, but they knew that they couldn't ask anything. So they just stood there, silent, accepting whatever was to come next. Vasporio! Caesar turned towards the so-called Great Vasporio. Yes, Lord? Vasporio bowed, but Caesar signaled him to get up. I promised that I would reward you if it turned out you were correct about those ants you spotted in Battlefield. Caesar pointed at Dan, who was still unconsciously laying in his cell prison. Vasporio observed the ant. He feared that he might be punished. This was because the ant that was lying in that cell wasn't one of the ants he'd seen. Lord, that ant, he wanted to explain, but Caesar raised his stopped left leg, showing Vasporio that he didn't finish talking. As you can see, this ant does not have an Ozara's feather blade. But this ant had something else, something far more intriguing. Caesar smiled as he saw the utter confusion on Vasporio's face. He had a story. Turns out you were, in fact, right about ants carrying a couple of feather blades around. The assassins just happened to catch the wrong ant. But it doesn't matter. Those ants shouldn't present any trouble, so I won't be searching for them. Hearing that story from this ant satisfied my curiosity. But a promise is a promise. Thus you, Vasporio, have now been promoted. You are a general now. Congratulations, the cunning knight said. This excited Vasporio, who thought to himself, a general? Me? At last, my efforts have finally paid off. I've been noticed by Lord Caesar. I, great Vasporio, have finally risen above all those who doubted my incredible skills. Thank you, Lord. The general of Vasporio bowed before Caesar. Yes, and your first mission will prove that you have what it takes to be a leader. Caesar immediately showed why he promoted Vasporio so easily. As you can see, I can no longer fly. Thus, once Ozara strikes, I will not be able to lead the army in the battle. That's where you step in, General Vasporio. You will lead the army and defeat the Grand Menace. You will lead the army that will protect the new Castana, the fixed Castana. Castana I've rebuilt. Caesar's powerful voice reached Vasporio, who, despite what the others in the room expected him to do, accepted this mission without hesitation. I will do my best, Lord. Vasporio stood straight and said those words with pride. Ever since he was a child, Vasporio was pretty egoistic, you could say. This is why he never really had any friends. But he did not mind that. He always saw himself as someone destined for greatness, someone who would stand above the rest, above all others. Due to this ego, he often overestimated his own skills, and others often doubted what he could do. But now it was his chance. A chance to prove everyone that he was capable, more than capable. Sure, he had made mistakes before, but this is the new Vasporio. Now he was a general. Now all he needed to do was show that he was worthy of carrying that title. This is why he was quick to accept the mission without any complaints. Vasporio was determined to succeed this time. Now, Caesar turned towards the sleeping ant. What to do with you, then? Caesar asked himself, not knowing that he would come up with an answer very, very soon. In front of that room, at the end of the long hallway, Antonio, pull out your blade. We're going to enter now, Hercules told the young ant. What? Antonio was confused. But shouldn't we wait for Nathan to come back? He told us to wait for him. Nathan is not coming back, kid, Hercules said in a sad and upset tone. Antonio was too shocked to say anything for a few moments. What did Hercules mean by this? Nathan just went to inspect that room behind him. He will appear any moment now, right? Antonio turned around and looked behind him. Yes, Nathan will appear at any moment now, he thought to himself. He did not want to believe the words that Hercules let out. Why would you say that, Hercules? The question kept echoing in Antonio's head more and more as the time passed, and Nathan was nowhere to be seen. That room, it was filled with wasps, Antonio, Hercules coldly said. Antonio turned to face Hercules. What? He asked with his weak voice. Both Nathan and I felt it when we passed next to it. At least a dozen wasps, maybe more. Nathan decided to stay behind to buy us some time, Antonio. Time to finish what we started. Hercules' tone was strong and serious, but the truth was opposite. Hercules was doing his absolute best to hold back tears. He was doing his best to look strong in front of Antonio, but it was getting pretty difficult to do so. No, you're lying. I don't want to believe you. You're lying. Antonio started yelling. Antonio, keep your voice down, kid. Hercules tried to calm him down, but it did not work. Why would you let him go then? Why would you let him go if you knew, Hercules? Why would you let him go to fight alone? Antonio's voice started breaking. If the three of us all went in together, we would... He suddenly turned around. We can go now. If we go now, maybe we can save Nant. Antonio wanted to run back. He wanted to run back to the room Nathan entered, but Hercules stopped him. Antonio, you know that we can't do that. Nathan wouldn't approve it. He would want us to finish this. Hercules' words struck deep into Antonio's soul, and the ant knew that the harsh words were the truth. He knew that Hercules was right. He knew that he had to finish this. That it was the sole reason for Nathan staying behind. So without any further resistance or words, Antonio listened. His eyes became blurry as the tears slowly started forming in them. But he had to be strong. He could cry later, but now he had to finish this. So he pulled out his blade, held back his tears, and, together with Hercules, entered the room at the end of the hallway. They entered the room in which their journey would finally conclude. After the door opened, what followed was a full minute of silent confusion. The 7 wasps were shocked to see an ant and a Hercules beetle this deep inside their nest. To make things even more surprising, the ant carried an Ozara's feather blade. On the other side, Antonio immediately recognized 2 bugs. The first one was the Cicada wasp that was missing a wing. Caesar the Cunning. But it was the other bug that really shocked Antonio. Behind Caesar, behind all of the other wasps, there was a single ant, lying unconscious inside a cellular hexagon-shaped prison. And it wasn't just any ant. It was 10, Antonio's best friend. Hercules, however, was more intrigued by how Caesar looked. Weak, shaken, and missing his left wing. This was a clear sight that they were too late. A clear sign that Caesar has already faced off against Dan, and he came victorious. "An ant!" Caesar said as his eyes widened. "Ten?" Antonio said loudly. The other wasps didn't know what to do. Some of them were looking at Caesar, others at Hercules, but nobody dared to move. They knew that if they did, there would be unnecessary bloodshed. We were late. Hercules was disappointed. Caesar raised his top left leg, signaling to the others present in the room to hold still, to not attack. "An ant and a Hercules beetle," Caesar said. Hercules and Antonio were standing still. Hercules was carefully observing Caesar, while Antonio still couldn't grasp why his best friend was there. "Before you say anything, I have to tell you that I already know why you're here. Your friend Tan here was very cooperative. He told me all about the little mission Elderanta sent you off to." "What?" Antonio found it hard to breathe after hearing those words. Caesar knew about them? How and why did he capture Tan? Antonio had many questions, but he knew that only one thing mattered now: getting Tan out of there. "Oh, you must be confused. Antonio, correct?" Caesar asked. The tone of his voice was evil. He enjoyed this. The terrified look of confusion and fear on Antonio's face and in his eyes, he found it all very amusing. "Caesar!" Hercules loudly exclaimed. "If you knew why we're here, then tell us. Tell us, why did you do it? Why did you kill Diablo? What did you do to Dan?" Vasporio, Harlow, and the other 4 guards present in the room all turned their looks towards Caesar. He killed Diablo too? Diablo the Heavy? All of them thought to themselves. There were so many things their lord was hiding from them. Caesar noticed that the atmosphere in the room has changed. He knew that he had to be careful with what he says next. "Everything I did it for the greater good of Castania," Caesar said, but he sounded far less confident. He sounded like he doubted his own words. Was this Dan's doing? Just what the hell was going on with Caesar? Why was he still shaken from the fight with Dan? What was going on? The tension in the room only rose as Hercules followed up his questions. "Greater good? I bet you said the same words to Dan before you killed him." The beetle knew what the outcome of the battle was. I didn't want to kill him. He made it impossible for me not to," Caesar started. "Nobody was supposed to die except Diablo and the bear. I did it all to fix Castania, to fix the broken system the bear created. And it would have all worked out flawlessly if Dan didn't interfere. He killed Moteas. Lucana took her own life because of it, and I lost my ability to fly. Yes, it was all Dan's doing. He had to go." Hercules realized that arguing with Caesar any further would be pointless. He was far too blinded by his own ideology, even after he knew that it was wrong. Even after Dan told him the truth. Even after Dan made him realize that he had hurt and ended far, far more lives than he had saved. Hercules wanted to kill Caesar right then and there. He went over a few scenarios in his head. If he was quick enough, he would be able to take out all 7 of them, right? And had it not been for a certain promise he made to someone, Hercules would have probably attempted it. But due to that promise that he made, Hercules held back his desires to end this evil bastard's life. But it was too risky for Antonio and his unconscious friend. All that Hercules could hope for now is that Antonio, him and Dan would be able to leave this place alive. But his hopes wouldn't live for long. Caesar, please. Antonio was barely able to speak. Let Dan go. Let him go and we'll leave. I don't know why he's here, but please, we completed our mission. You completed your plans. There's no need for any further deaths. Antonio desperately tried to reason with the unreasonable wasp, and Antonio's begging was met with a cruel, vicious look on Caesar's face, as he coldly told him, "My best friend died today, so why should yours live?" Caesar suddenly opened Dan's cell. "No!" Antonio fell on his knees, too weak to move, dropping his sword to the ground. His head hurt, his vision was blurred. He did not understand why Caesar would have to go this far. Hercules just turned his head to the other side. The wasps were at full alert now. If Hercules attacked, it would be guaranteed suicide. There was nothing he could do. Caesar lifted Dan's unconscious body and the cunning knight stung Dan in the stomach, ending the poor ant's life. "No! No! No!" Antonio sobbed on the ground. First Nathan and now Dan too? 2 of Antonio's best friends died today. It was too much for the young ant to bear. It was too much for anyone to bear. His soul hurt like it never hurt before. He was lying, crawled up on the ground, crying. Hercules stood next to him. The beetle kept his guard up in case Caesar ordered an all-out attack on them. But just as Caesar started enjoying the sight of Antonio breaking down in front of him, it all unexpectedly came back to bite him. Wendell, the guard, entered the room. He did not seem to notice nor to care about what was happening around him. He looked very disturbed. "Lord Caesar!" Wendell called out when he saw him. "Lord Caesar, something terrible happened." "What is it, Wendell?" Caesar asked. "It's the Queen Hornetta, she's dead," Wendell said. Caesar's face went completely pale. "What?" he was barely able to let out. She killed herself. She had a knife. I suspect she had it hidden under her bed. She stabbed herself in her stomach about 20 or so times before she bled out. I went inside to check in on her after you were in the room. When I found her, I ran here as soon as I could, sir," Wendell explained. No. Caesar nervously started circling around the room. No, that bitch!" he screamed. "How could she? She was pregnant. She was carrying my children inside her. How could she?" Vasporio, Harlow, and the other guards took a few steps back. As their lord started losing it more and more, they were worried for their own safety. "This was not supposed to happen," Caesar said with a quiet, cracking voice. "Who will inherit my place as the Master King after me? No. After a few more minutes, Caesar seemed to have calmed down. "Doesn't matter," he whispered. "It doesn't matter." He sounded less and less sane. still achieved my goals. I still... A loud, frightening caw echoed throughout the entire Castanean kingdom. It was an all too familiar sign of a great evil emerging from the sky. The grand menace was approaching. Everyone froze for a few seconds. Ozara is here. Caesar was the first to speak. The fragile, shaking voice didn't do much to give the rest of the wasps hope or confidence. But then... All right, everyone! You know what to do! General Vasporia spoke. His voice was the complete opposite of Caesar's. He was confident, excited and determined. That's it, he thought. This is it. This is the moment I've been waiting for my whole life. Lord Caesar prepared you for this very moment, didn't he? So get going. Harrow, take the 5 guards down to the weapon storage. Wendell, you'll go with me to the floor above. We'll get the army ready. Quick, we've got no time to waste. Vaspori ordered, and the others listened. It was the only thing they could do, considering that their lord has certainly lost it. Caesar looked pale. He sounded weak. He could no longer fly, and he mumbled to himself. Whatever happened when he fought then, it clearly had a permanent effect on his mental state. He was no longer able to lead the kingdom. And considering that the queen was dead, the next highest in command was none other than the newly promoted general. And so Harlow, Wendell and the others had no choice but to listen to Vasporio. Harlow, Wendell, Vasporio and the 4 wasp guards all exited the room. They went to prepare to face Ozara along with the wasp army. This left only 3 bugs in this room. Caesar, who was standing in the middle of the room, mindlessly staring somewhere, mumbling some gibberish to himself. Antonio, who was still on the floor, silently sobbing, and Hercules. Castana, I did it all for Castana, yes. They'll see, they will all see. I fixed it, I fixed everything. Webonetta, I miss Webonetta. Caesar mumbled to himself. Hercules slowly leaned close to Antonio, whispering, Antonio, I know you're a shaken lad. I know it hurts. I know that it fucking hurts, but you have to be strong. We can end this now, Antonio. All you have to do is give me the blade. Antonio heard Hercules. He heard him and he wanted to listen, yet his own body refused to move. The blade was laying on the ground next to him. Caesar kept mumbling to himself. His back was facing Hercules and Antonio. Come on, Antonio, pass me the blade, Hercules whispered. Antonio thought about Nathan, about Diablo, about Lucana, about Dan, about Ten, about everyone Caesar hurt, everyone Caesar killed. It gave him the courage he needed, the determination he needed to end this painful, sorrowful journey. So he slowly picked up the blade. His legs were uncontrollably shaking as he lifted it. He almost dropped it a few times, but at the end he did it. He managed to pass the blade to Hercules. Hercules then swiftly, without a single nanosecond of hesitation, charged towards the unsuspecting Caesar, stabbing through his chest. This is for everyone you've ever heard best. This is for Dan, for Nathan, Hercules cried out. Huh? It took a few seconds for Caesar to realize what had happened. His mind was too shattered. Blood started dripping from his mouth, and it didn't take long for him to fall to the ground. He then let out his final words. Webonetta. Dan? Are you calling for me? Caesar the Cunning, the last one of the so-called Great Knights, died. The bug that has caused so much death, so much pain and suffering, so much misery, has finally been brought to justice. The entire kingdom of Hornus shook left and right as 100 wasps exited all at once. At the same time, not too far away, a black bird was rapidly approaching the Castanean tree. "All right! Just like the Lord Caesar taught you!" General Vasporio, who led the wasp army, exclaimed. He was loud and clear, and the army listened. The army split up into two parts, 50 wasps in each one. One half of the army, led by Harlow, went to the left, while the other half, led by Wendell, left to the right. They were planning to surround the beast from all sides. "Great! Point the blades at the beast!" Vasporia yelled. Ozara let out another chilling caw when he got closer to the army. "Attack!" Vasporia screamed, and the army bravely charged upwards onto the raging beast. The truth was, Vasporio was never present at any of the training sessions, as Vasporio was never in the kingdom of Hornus to begin with. He was always stationed at Beetlefield, always keeping an eye onto things. So how did he know that Caesar taught the army then? Well, the truth is simple. He didn't. He didn't know what the battle plan was. He didn't know what the army was capable of. He didn't know anything. But if there was one thing Vasporia was good at, it was sounding like he knew what he was doing. His ego, his excitement, and his determination to prove himself were more than enough to convince the army that their general was a capable leader. And Harlow and Wendell, who were the only ones present beside Vasporio who knew about Caesar's deteriorating mental state, knew that their best shot at defeating Ozara was listening to Vasporio. So the brave army of 100 wasps, out of whom only 20 were armed with Ozara's feather weapons, attacked the beast. The 20 armed wasps attacked first, while the rest stung the beast wherever they could. From below them, from Beetlefield, from above them, from the Montesian tribe, from all parts of Castania, frightened bugs were appearing, scared eyes looking upwards, downwards, witnessing a miracle. An army, prepared to face the grand menace. After the great knights disappeared, slowly but surely, one after the other, the citizens of Castania regained something that they thought was long gone. They regained hope, a hope for a brighter future. And that hope was only strengthened by the sight above them. Ozara, the so-called Grand Menace, the beast that they, the common citizens, lived their whole life fearing, was powerless. Powerless against the sheer number of wasps, of warriors that attacked him. No, they didn't attack him. He attacked them. He attacked Castana, just like he did every 12 seasons. But this time, Castana struck back. And not just 5 warriors, not just 5 knights, no. This time, 100 warriors struck back. 100 brave warriors who outnumbered and overwhelmed the Black Beast. The Black Beast was hit, stabbed, stung and scratched from all sides. It couldn't do anything to fight back. And the sight of the beast falling down so easily, it made the citizens below wonder. Who? Just who in Castana would be able to lead such an army? Who was the one able to protect us when our biggest heroes abandoned us? And then they noticed him. The sole wasp separated from the rest, shouting and ordering the others around. They noticed Vasporio. He became the face of the army. He became their new hero. Inside the Hexagon Tower, Kingdom of Hornest. "It's over, Antonio. It's finally over," Hercules whispered as he looked at Caesar's dead body. Antonio slowly got up. He knew that he had to. The two of them had to get out of there before the wasps return, before the battle is over. "Hercules," Antonio, whose whole body quivered uncontrollably, was barely able to let out. The shock, the pain, it was all too much for the young ant. and he slowly managed to ask what he was trying. "Can you carry them?" "I can," Hercules nodded, before lifting Ten's body, putting it on his back. "Climb on my back, will ya? You'll have to hold them," he told Antonio, and then the ant slowly and carefully climbed the Hercules beetle. "Ya done?" he asked. "Yes," Antonio confirmed. "All right, let's go get Nathan." Hercules opened the door and left the room. He carried Antonio and Ten across the long hallway, and they made it to the room. Hercules hesitated for a few moments before opening the door. He knew that what he would see was going to be terrible, but nothing could have prepared him for the sight that followed. 11 dead assassin wasps, blood all over them, and in the middle of the room, a single ant rested. An ant that had fought fearlessly and bravely against much stronger opponents. An ant that fought to protect his friends. An ant that refused to die alone. In the middle of the room lied a single ant. Nathan the Sturdy, the ant who took out 11 assassins with him. His body was pale, stained with a ton of blood coming from all of his wounds. There were 4 holes in his body, 2 on his chest, 1 on the side and 1 on his back. The 4 holes from the 4 stings he withstood. The sight, it was too much for Hercules. "Nathan! Nathan! You bastard!" Hercules screamed, his voice shattered from the pain. All of the emotions that he's been withholding this whole time burst out all at once. How could you, Nathan? How dare you? I kept my promise, Nathan. I kept it. I kept him safe. You were supposed to keep yours too. How dare you die, Nate? How dare you die, bastard? I'll never forgive you for this. I'll never forgive you. He screamed and screamed. He cried and cried. Antonio just closed his eyes. He didn't want to look at Nathan's body. He didn't want to listen to Hercules's cries. He just closed his eyes and hoped that the noises would end soon. After a couple of minutes, the sound of the ongoing battle reminded Hercules that he had to be strong. He had to get them out of there. So the beetle carefully lifted his fallen friend's body and put it on his back. It took a few minutes for them to climb down the hexagon tower and find their way back to the entrance of Hornest. From this position, Hercules and Antonio witnessed the battle. It was very close to its end. Ozara, the Grand Menace, was mortally wounded from all the stings, stabs and scratches he withstood. The wasps were doing an outstanding job defending Castana. There were casualties, of course, but the number was very small compared to the size of the army. But the beetle and the ant had no time to look at the battle. They had to leave. Hercules breathed in a few times to calm down and prepare for the jump. "Hold tight, Antonio," he said before jumping. His wings buzzed loudly as he carried the 3 ants on his back to the nearest tree tunnel.